I won a BAFTA with that film. All this work had finally been recognized. Shoot the People is an observation of the lifetimes and work of the first black photographer to shoot the cover of Vogue. The Fade, I wanted to explore the African Holocaust, and I wanted to kind of look at how the movement of culture moved with people. The Barbershop was a cornerstone that's still to this day one of the only industries that's managed, owned, supported by people that it serves.
How do you break into the creative industry? And how do our experiences shape our careers? Welcome to the podcast that asks the most influential creatives how they got the role that ultimately changed everything and what proactive tips others can adopt to get the picture. I'm your host, Kiosa Sukami, and this podcast series is brought to you by London Podcast Studios. Today, we sit down with Andy Mundy-Castle, a BAFTA-winning filmmaker with a deep passion for storytelling that took root as early as 14 years old. After studying media and completing a master's in documentary filmmaking, Andy took an unexpected detour into the home office, gaining corporate experience before taking the leap into the freelance life, where he has been ever since. Andy has carved out a unique space for himself, with a creative journey including standout projects like The Fade, a self-funded global exploration of barbers and identity picked up by Netflix, and White Nanny Black Child, a moving documentary that blends archive footage and cinematography to explore the UK's hidden histories. Amazing. So we wanted to bring you on this podcast because obviously I personally am a fan of your work. Recently, White Nanny Black Child was one of the most recent projects, which we'll get to talking about in a second. But I think I wanted to bring you on because you are a very special filmmaker in the sense that you're very niche and focused in documentary. Obviously, when we talk about filmmaking generally, everybody thinks of fiction films and, action movies and all that kind of stuff. But oftentimes documentary gets overlooked, but it's a very special form of medium for myself personally. So before we get into talking about that, I would like to get to know Andy a little bit better. So let's go back into actually talking about your journey from the very beginning. So I want to ask maybe where you were born and raised to actually get us started off with.
The very beginning. So I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, to a British professor who was on secondment from the UK and a Nigerian mother. And, we had a very sort of safe upbringing. My dad was a child psychologist. He set up the Department of Psychology in the University of Lagos. So, he was always exploring people through cameras. So growing up, I would see, I would always see sort of cameras around the house and kind of understanding people from a point of human behavior, and there's even tapes of me watching that happen. So somewhere in the subconscious that had been planted into my mind very early on, that observing people was a way to get to human connection, was a way to get to human truth. And I kind of, I suppose, you don't really know what's happening during those times. You're just a kid, you want to enjoy, play with your toys, play games, enjoy time with your brothers, your sisters, what have you. But clearly it was having an impact on me. Fast track, my mom, who was the Nigerian, always wanted to come to the UK, but my dad was like, we'd have a better life in Africa if we stay here. He left the UK for a reason because, he wasn't one for structure or governance or the way in which, kind of the UK ran. So he knew he would always have a better life in Africa, and his heart was in Africa. And I say Africa because we moved to Zimbabwe, Kenya. He was doing the same thing in different places, helping in different psychological departments. But my mum always had an ambition to come to Britain, and we did. We came sort of when I was about 9 years old. Now I share this with you because it informs the kind of stories that I tell.
Yeah.
It's kind of like my life is constantly in balance, constantly in flux, and I'm always trying to understand the world around me based on the childhood experiences that I had. How do I use all of that energy, all of that understanding, all of that hardship, the pain, the love, the exploration and feed that into the stories that I tell. So I had always wanted to stay in films. I'd always wanted to tell sort of real stories. And even right through GCSEs, I kind of always had this thing. I used to watch films from a filmmaker called Soraya Samora. He was a Sierra Leonean filmmaker. And he was talking about, he was making films about civil wars across West Africa, but couple in particular. One was called Cry Freetown. I remember watching that, lying in my bed as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, and thought, is this real? Is this actually real? I couldn't believe that this guy had access to child soldiers and was in the midst of war, seeing things happen. And it was better than any fiction story I'd ever seen. Like, there was nothing that came close to it. It inspired, like, his films would inspire neorealist French filmmakers. And there's one film in particular which I'd seen that had been inspired by Psoriasis' work. And that was a film called Johnny Mad Dog. And for anyone that's never seen that, you have to watch it, because even if you're a storyteller and you want to see what reality is like, it's hard, but it's real. It evokes every kind of emotion.
Yeah.
And you can see traits of that in, like, one of my other favorite films, which is City of God. You know, there's a lot of things that sort of connect with how people tell real stories, and I think it's the hardest thing. It's really the hardest thing. But, you know, fortunately, going through GCSEs, I managed to get by.
So let's pause it. Before we go into like GCSEs and talking about education, I want to maybe ask about your family dynamic. Like, and what was that like? Obviously, you mentioned you had other siblings, and of course that your dad was working as a physician. You said, yeah, psychologist. Sorry. So in that context, was there anything other than what your dad did for work that was kind of influential? I know you mentioned that you then wanted to do GCSEs later on, but at the very early stages of moving to the UK, were you very much still kind of finding yourself in that sense that you didn't really know what you wanted to do, or did you already have like an inkling of maybe when I get a bit older, this might be what I wanted to do? Because moving over to the UK, I'm sure there must be a lot of things that you're thinking of.
I mean, I was still a young boy.
Yeah.
You know, and when you're of a certain age, you are just bothered about PlayStation, Mega Drive, playing football with your friends. At that stage, I wanted to be a footballer.
Yeah.
Like most young boys, you know, I really wanted to be a footballer. And I was semi-decent, had trials at several places, ended up playing semi-professional.
Okay.
You know, so I kind of, those were the dreams that I had. But in the background, I knew that there was I knew that the path was being created to sort of tell real stories. And I say this because in like year 4 and some of the secondary school friends that I have now, I went to a really tough school in South London, Camberwell, called Archbishop Michael Ramsey, which has now been changed to something, but it's one of the first schools to have like a police presence on the gates, actually. And I remember it was my class's time to tell the year assembly, and my tutor, Mr. Dyson, had an old camera in his cupboard. And it was my idea to say, why don't we, because we were kind of a shy class, and I said, why don't we do our assembly as a film?
Okay.
You know, and film this whole thing. And I wish I could find that tape today, but I'm sure it's hidden in some dusty Camberwell cupboards right now. But you know, I remember initiating that we conducted our assembly via being filmed, just like this, and then we show it on a screen in front of the assembly. And at that time, it was a big thing because no one had ever done it, you know. So that was an early experience, and I just kept on along my educational journey and consistently always went to media studies or television and film and sociology and psychology, you know. So I was always studying things that connected human behavior. Yeah. Because for me, stories are about human connection.
Okay. So then talk to me about your early education. And obviously you mentioned that maybe at 14 you were already kind of thinking about making documentaries and then eventually GCSEs as well then. So what was your experience in education like generally? And of course, moving from, I guess, your sort of primary, secondary school education to higher education, what was like for you? Because I know a lot of people, academics is always something that is pushed. So then to then go off and study something that is maybe a little bit creative might be a little bit outside of the norm. But what was your experience with education like?
Yeah, I mean, look, I come from with many West African families, or sort of blended West African families. Education is key. Like it's something that's drummed into us, and it's not a bad thing. You know, it's something that we shouldn't shy away from, and should sort of lean into. I think, you know, for me, I had many different experiences because we were constantly moving. You know, and there was a constant reset. There was always a reset. Wherever we'd go, I'd start a new school, and every 3 years there'd be a new school. And then when we got to the UK, fortunately, I was able to sort of do my whole secondary period at one school. and then I went to a sixth form, which was a slightly better sixth form. And then I did the traditional university route. I did a BA in film and media at University of East London, and then I personally wanted to do a master's, and I went to do a master's in documentary film. But that was just because I really wanted to just embed myself in this art form. I just really wanted to understand what it was, and again, I think that calling just kept on pushing me in that direction.
And how was maybe the conversation with your parents or your family? Like, obviously,
it's really weird because I think because my family at that stage were kind of ruptured. My mum was just trying to do her best. It was really my brother, who is a headmaster at the moment. He's a teacher. He's a big sort of educational. He would constantly sort of just guide me back into education. The conversation about doing anything was really, at that time, it wasn't even my parents. When I went to study media studies, and the national press was saying it was a terrible course.
Okay, wow.
This was 25 years ago. I think it was a Tony Blair government. They were, or it had just come out. It was, the national press was saying media studies, what a joke.
They didn't believe it as a...
No, it wasn't something that, because you remember it's a relatively new course.
Yeah.
It's only something that's been in existence 30 years or so, I think. The understanding or the theory or the subject of studying media and cultural studies. These are all very new faculties. So I basically, I kind of, it was kind of, there was a question as to, is this, are you actually doing something that's going to be of any benefit? But I say to anyone, and I've had this for a very long time, like even when I was going through those courses, I was always of the mind that this is for nobody else but me. Like, I've got to do something to nourish my mind. And it's very clear about that, even from a young age. I was like, okay, no, I want to do media and film. I want to understand cultural studies. No, I want to do an MA in documentary. Like, has that got me any jobs? No. What it's done is it means that when I talk about what I like, I can talk with clarity, I can talk with assurance, I can talk with confidence about something that I've invested in. And I think that the experience of being in an educational setting, it's more about that wider framework, that thing that it offers you, that creates a friendship group, that creates a tribe, that creates a community, that creates a path for you to grow with. May work out, may not work out, but does it get you a job? I think that's becoming harder. And you asked about early experiences that help shape the journey. I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm not just a documentary filmmaker. I think about how the business meets the art. I think about how the commerce meets the art. And that definitely comes down to the grit and the hard work that I saw my mum imbue in everything that she would do. The
business and the creative is a hard thing for a lot of creators to kind of find a balance. So for you then, coming out of education, obviously you mentioned that maybe you weren't able to find any work. You said that, did you get a job? No. So I want to ask about your experiences coming out of education and how that was like very early on, having this degree that, as you mentioned, that at the time there was a lot of pushback. Nobody really thought it was a degree to kind of take seriously. So for you then coming out of this, of course, taking on everything that you have learned, as you said, you could speak confidently about now what you're passionate about. So what was your experiences leaving education and going out into the big world of, I guess, work?
It was tough for the first few months. You get your degree, you get your 2-1, your first, your third, whatever it is, your distinction. And for me, I remember getting up, and back then you didn't have email the way we do now. I had to call people up for jobs. And I remember my mum sort of on my shoulder saying, call up those people, call up for your job, and it was nothing that I wanted to do, and then there was, back then how we would look for jobs was at the back of the Guardian. That was the only place they had media jobs, like anything remotely media, runner jobs, this, that, and the other. And I would relentlessly call and look at everywhere and just send a CV. I used to put my CV in an envelope and go and hand it into different places. Didn't get anything. you know, and then a graduate position had come up with, again, the government at the time. I worked for the Home Office.
Okay.
So I just needed to do something.
Yeah.
And fortunately was part of an agency that then got me onto a scheme. And for about 18 months, I was an immigration officer.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, and it was really weird. When I say immigration officer, it wasn't like port of control, passport deportation. It was really about, our department was a specific department set up called NAS. NAS was the National Asylum Seeker Service. And that was a special department that was set up to monitor people when they had come into the country, and justify their claims or look at their claims or investigate whether or not they had the right to remain in the country. I was terrible at that job because I was just like, well, I don't know what's happening. You can stay.
Yeah.
We're all immigrants.
Yeah.
Everyone's an immigrant now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't really like that job, but it was fun because I got to travel the country. And for me, I was speaking to so many people who had so many stories. You know, it was a gift actually, that job, because I had so much, I had the social setting with the people who I worked with, had a couple of racists in there, but then I also had, you know, and it's something I take with me now, you constantly have revolving door of stories, like a place where people are just offering their experience to you, because that's what it was. You know, I would have to turn up to houses and just kind of monitor what was in the house. So if it was somebody who'd just come in from Albania, for instance, and they've got a high-tech TV, you know, the latest trainers, all these clothes, I'd have to report on how they appeared to be living. Was it that of somebody who was working without the ability to work? You know, so it was just really fascinating. And then the BBC actually came and did a documentary on my department.
Okay.
And it was at that moment that I thought, oh, okay, so this is how it's done. You know, so they were filming part of my department, and it was, I don't think the series actually ever went anywhere, but it was that trigger that then I said, oh, the money that I've saved from working for this immigration service, I used that to pay for my master's, to retrain and go and, you know, learn about documentaries a bit more. Because up until then, I'd just been consuming films. And then, you know, then I started getting introduced to other filmmakers, you know, namely John Akomfra, and a guy called Ishmael Blagrove, who to this day continue to be sources of inspiration.
Yeah, it's a big investment in your career then, isn't it, to take what you've earned and then go back and do a master's. So after doing that master's, then were you now hopefully doing more media sort of work, film sort of work, or how are things for you then?
So no, I was still sort of just hustling. I was making short bits of content. I was telling stories about friends. I was just like constantly shooting. So there's on YouTube, like, you know, I had some YouTube page which I must have set up about 20 years ago, and I'm glad that I can still see it, and I can see some of the early things that I'd just thrown on there, because I was just telling stories of my community. I was telling stories of people that I knew. At that stage, your worldview is quite local and not so broad, so you kind of go and tell the stories around you. And I'd always like have cameras, you know. I sort of say, if I was born in this generation, I would have 100% been a like full-blown content creator, just out there with my camera, because, you know, I've got tapes which I was doing that when I was young, and that was kind of just constantly around. You know, didn't really get paid for that, you know, but I was lucky. I got some roles at certain places that helped me. The game changer for me really was during my master's, where I managed to get an in-house directing role at the Albany Theatre. Okay. And the Albany Theatre, which is in Deptford, local theatre, but had loads of great they had loads of great shows and performances that would come through. And so I was kind of pretty much making a lot of their, what would now be known as digital content. I was creating all the BTS and all of that. And then I was employing my friends who were on my documentary course to kind of just be the people who would help us navigate that, you know. So I would make money that way. I actually paid for my master's. Okay, so, amazing. You know, even so I didn't really touch the money that I'd saved. And that was kind of the beginning of the entrepreneur meets the documentarian or the artist filmmaker.
Amazing. So then what would you say was your, obviously after doing the work at the theatre, what would you say was your first official projects that you shot on your own?
I felt like the first break that I had really was when I was making my graduation film, which was looking at homophobia within the African Caribbean community. So, fortunately, there was a producer working for he was developing ideas with Channel 4. He'd seen my graduation film, Twice as Hard, which was looking at homophobia within the African Caribbean communities. And he said, look, I'm making this film and it's about homophobia in the black community. And at the time it was called Batty Man, which was a forerunner to Chatty Man. That's why Channel 4 went on to do that thing, I believe, because it kind of all sort of like that. Batty Man was Stephen K. Amos, who's a Nigerian comedian who'd lost his friend. His friend was brutally murdered in Clapham Common, actually, as an attack on his sexuality, and that became the catalyst for a film that became the first thing I got paid for, properly. And I felt like, I'm on a journey here. And then there was loads of other little dotted bits that kind of popped up after that.
I think I want to now actually talk about your projects themselves as well. Then now we've chosen 3 different ones that I wanted to explore.
Yeah.
First one being The Fade, which was a documentary that is actually still on Netflix and I actually managed to watch before we came here. And I think now listening to your story about traveling around and moving around, I actually see that now, because the documentary itself follows different barbers that are based in different countries and stuff like that. So do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about The Fade and how that sort of came about? Because before we spoke off the podcast, you said it actually was a self-funded project. So talk to me a little bit about
what was your opinion of the film?
I thought it was really good. When I saw Jay Sean, I was like, I'm sold already, because I was a big Jay Sean fan from when I was really young.
Yeah.
At first, I wasn't too sure about where it was going, what it was about. So it kind of took me a while to kind of like really get into it. But then the minute you started to introduce other barbers and different contexts, like, okay, cool. I was like, yeah.
Okay, cool. That's what I wanted to hear, because to this day, I kind of still don't. I don't even know what I was doing.
Really?
I wanted to shout. I wanted to say, this is who I am. This is kind of, this is the beginning of me creating my own journey. So I look at that project with joy, but also sort of like, you're crazy. What the hell were you doing? You know what I mean? But I made that film. So The Fade, I wanted to explore the transatlantic map. The transatlantic slave route or the African Holocaust, and I wanted to kind of look at how the movement of culture moved with people, and how the barbershop was a cornerstone wherever people landed. That's still to this day one of the only industries that's managed, owned, supported by people that it serves. You do that is kind of like that and hair salons. You can't take that away from the African community. Like, they need it for each other to facilitate. And it's a really great example of how industry can support itself if people really believe in the product, or if people really need the product. And that's the one thing that I'd always felt like, whenever we go in the barber, and you look at cultural references, Barbershop, the film, coming to America, the first thing he does when he goes to America is go to the barbershop to kind of, and that's where he learns about the culture. And I think that, again, back to that thing I was saying about, I'm constantly looking for where I can find vehicles of stories, and how you've got a revolving door of stories, because when you've got characters who have all the flaws and complexities that humans do, you don't have to search too hard for a story. You just tell somebody to talk, like I'm doing now. You know what I mean? And you are skillfully just navigating the interview. So that is, like, for me, like, it was something that I felt, right, this is a way to explore how it must feel for people who left the continent, or who were taken from the continent, and having to set up a fresh version of themselves wherever they went, and to try and facilitate growth and nurturing and healing within a community. And the barbershop's a cornerstone of that, and people should never forget that. Amazing. And that's what I wanted to do with The Fade.
Yeah, it definitely came across. I wanted to ask maybe like the process into actually making it. Like, were you a self-shooting documentary filmmaker at the time? Did you have, so what was the actual physical?
I mean, again, and like I say, when you're starting out on your journey, and I think I always have to make this clear to people who are at the early part of their journeys, that you're exactly where you need to be. it's not a race. You know, like I say right now, I'm pitching for something. I'm pitching for something right this minute, and if I get it, it's a big deal. The stamina that I've been able to sort of run the marathon with, that I know that I'm not gonna jump too quickly. I'm just gonna hold my own and know that if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I remember being young and just thinking, why the hell don't you like my ideas? Why don't you want to know about barbershops that are around the world? Why doesn't this work for you? You know, so I always think my ideas were the best ideas possible. Like, these are great things. I still do think they're decent, but, you know, I feel that, you know, when you're younger, you think the world owes you something. And really is, you got to fight for that ownership. You got to work hard for understanding what it is that you should own. And big deal conversations take a lot of work. They take a lot of understanding. They take a lot of component parts. And so you're exactly where you need to be at this moment in your journey. And, but back then I was at a place where I thought, I want to be a director. I want to actually help navigate the stories. And how do I do what those sources of inspiration? How do I do what Soraya Samora did? How do I do what Ishmael Blagrove is doing? How do I do what Kim Longinotto is doing? You know, just go out there and try and tell a story. And so I felt I came up with the idea, and I didn't know how to make it. And I knew I was a decent shooter. I did used to start. I started in self-shooting, and that's what people sort of knew me for as an assistant director, as assistant producer. I had a good eye, but I never enjoyed the technicality of things. I didn't like sort of getting, like, even the white balance is off and I've got to stand there for 10 hours trying to work out how to sort out the white balance or how to get the sound right. And it was always my greatest fear that the technology would stop me from telling the story. So I would look for people who were so, like, just as passionate about the technology as I was about the story. And fortunately, I went to, so my mecca is a place called Sheffield Documentary Film Festival. When I was younger, that was the place that you would go to meet all these amazing filmmakers. And as a young kid, you know, sort of 21, I was thinking, okay, let me go where other people are in the art form that I want to pursue. And fortunately, I met a good friend, who's still my good friend today and has shot a lot of stuff for me over the years. He's named Tom Swindell, a director of photography. And and I said to him, he had just come back from shooting a film in Ghana. Okay. And I wanted to go to Ghana as a point in West Africa that had a mass proliferation of people who left those shores, you know, who were taken from those shores. And I said, look, I'm doing something crazy. It's about barbershops. He was like, have you got the barber? Have you been to Ghana? Do you know what you're doing? And I was like, no, but it's an adventure. And let's go. And sure as hell we went and we found Tupac.
Wow.
You know? We found Tupac. Yeah.
Amazing.
So, and for those of people who don't know Tupac, go and watch The Fade on Netflix.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. The next one that I want to talk about, of course, is White Nanny Black Child.
Yeah.
No. Before I move over to that documentary itself, I want to talk about distribution and sales, obviously, because it is your first major documentary, and it has ended up on Netflix. Now, I want to ask, does that come around a couple of years later after you made other things, or have you kind of been always in the know, kind of know distribution and kind of figured it all out?
Yeah, so there's a part in the journey that I haven't told you. And your producer, Laurel, will know the area, but it's in South London and across the whole of actually the UK. There was a home entertainment distribution chain, Blockbusters, and then there was Apollo Home Entertainment. Okay. After I had done a few roles in television, I heard that this chain was going into administration. And Apollo Home Entertainment, for those of you that don't know, was the equivalent of Blockbuster, which is where people used to come and get their films on a Friday night, or throughout the week you'd Be Kind, Rewind, you know, kind of scenario video shops. And, you know, I'm a student of film overall. As much as I love documentaries, I studied film. I kind of just always consumed what was happening. And, you know, that sort of Tarantino being a video store, and I was thinking, well, I can own a video store, and it was really cheap, and they were going into administration, so I had an opportunity to buy it with a friend and a partner at that time. And, you know, I was going to buy my first house or put money into this business, and that was a home home end distribution company where we sold and bought films. So it gave me and I was about 27 at that time. And it gave me the opportunity to see how films were marketed, how they were sold, how I had to put different genres in different places, what the marketing looked like, and I was getting all the point of sale material from the big distributors.
Wow.
So I was in that conversation very young, and I understood how to kind of navigate some experience of buying and selling films.
Wow.
And that was my life for sort of 2.5 years. All the while I was still sort of dotting around doing producing jobs here and there. So I wasn't stopping. Like at that stage I had the energy. I was doing a lot. I was doing a lot, as they say now. Doing the most. I was doing the most. But I had the energy. I didn't have children at that stage, and I was a bit more freer in my ability to maneuver. But what I hadn't seen was that round the corner was Love Film and Netflix. Now, Love Film is the precursor to Netflix, because Love Film was, again, now they'd post DVDs to your house, and there was no late fees. So they killed the local man. They killed the little business community boy who wanted to start this thing, because I'd rebranded Apollo, the Apollo stores that I'd taken over. I rebranded them to call them the Film Lounge. And it was a place where people would lounge, come and watch a film, buy a film, rent a film, use my internet cafe, have a coffee. It was well ahead of its time. It was well ahead of its time. But I didn't have the marbles. I didn't have the business now, so I didn't have anything to kind of support me. So that's a precursor to how I understood sort of the ability to not just look at a film as this wonderful piece of art, but actually, what's the appreciation that the audience get from it? What is your end user going to do with this content that you make? And is it for them? What is for them? It's why secretly I'm a kind of, in my gut, I would love to make horror one day, because that was the thing that always sold.
Very niche, isn't it?
That was the thing that always, people always wanted horror. Everybody wanted horror. Unless it's a big blockbuster, everyone really liked, and also, I was of the time, my store, I was there at the time the Blair Witch Project had just come out. And so all I was reading was stories of this film made for I don't know, I think it was like $100,000 or so, but made over 250 million. And I thought, wow. That's business. That's business, and it was so smart. And when you look at the Blair Witch document, I'm about to call it the Blair Witch documentary, because when you look at the Blair Witch Project,
you see
it feels like a documentary.
You
know what I mean? It feels real. What was it about that? It evoked a fear in human nature that only comes from reality. But it's steeped in your inner consciousness that this thing could actually come and get you. So it was a really it was an interesting confusion of something that was artistic, commercially successful, but also was on the precipice of something new.
So what happened to the business in the end then? Did you sell it? Did you change it?
Administrated. So it got administrated. We had to fold up. It was one of the worst days of my life, because I saw the bailiffs at the door, and I went and hid behind the counter. I'm not here. Just give me. And it was so sad, because I had just won the Lambeth Business Award for Young Entrepreneur of the Year, Young Business of the Year or something. So I managed to call somebody who was at Lambeth and say, hey man, look, there's a real shit going down. There's bailiffs at my door. Please just help me. And then I managed to stave it off for about another month. But the truth is, the nail was in the coffin.
The industry was changing.
And it was dark times, because but you get up and you keep on going. That's the great thing about being young, is you can fail forward. You can take chances, you learn from it. You make friends, you keep on going. And as hard as it may seem in the moment, it's not the end of the world.
I wanted to now ask you about, obviously, White Nanny Black Child, moving on to that now. That was a project that it's made waves now. Could you tell us a little bit about background behind that? Obviously, as you said at the very top of this interview, you are from a Nigerian background, and this documentary does follow Nigerian children that were adopted by white nannies. So could you tell me a little bit about background in terms of the initial concept itself, and then of course making of the documentary itself as well, both maybe directing or even just the technical side of things as well?
So White Nanny Black Child is a film that looks at a unregulated process of white British families privately fostering Nigerian children. And I'd found out about this phenomenon from some friends who were basically, you know, it was like that thing when you buy a car and you start seeing loads of people with that car. A lot of my friends were like, "Oh no, I was privately fostered. I was privately fostered." And so many people in that were in my circumference started telling me about this thing and talking about it like it was nothing. You know, and I think at this time that I'd started that journey, I was starting to do some work on myself and trying to understand, like, you know, how your childhood experiences have an impact on who you are as an adult. And so I think the sort of flippant nature in which people would discuss this very sort of challenging part of their life, be it a positive or negative experience, it's still a period of time in which you're not with your paternal family. And I just was very intrigued by that. But also, being Nigerian British, I was like, oh, here's something that existentially portrays who I am as well. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? In a weird way, here is the mix of these two cultures in a way that had a kind of an interesting space, back to that idea of revolving door of characters. When I heard it wasn't just 5,000, it wasn't 10,000. It was over a period of decades. Wow. Thousands and thousands of Nigerian children had actually, West African children, not just Nigerian children, because it happened to Ghanaians, Cameroonians as well. You know, it happened. And that all comes back from that, you know, that adage, that African adage of, you know, takes a village to raise a child. So you think that coming to England, everyone is the village. We're all, you know, we're all here together, but it's not the same as the village back home, you know. So all of these things were just an interesting canvas for telling a story about migration from West Africa to Britain, because I was very familiar with the Windrush migration. or the Windrush generation, or that time in Caribbean history that many people from the West Indies came to help rebuild Britain post World War II. But I had heard very little about African migration. So for me, it was also a way of exploring, you know, what was the time in which Nigerians, and, you know, before my family came here, what's been the history of West Africans in the UK? Like, we can't just say we've been here. Every day you're talking about Windrush, as important as it is. But what about the other communities that make up this country that come from the African diaspora? So I had the opportunity to tell the story of private fostering with Adewale Akinnuoye Abaje, who's the Hollywood star. You would have seen him in a lot of films. And BBC commissioner, when we pitched it to this particular commissioner, he said, "This is really strange, and I'd never ever had this before, but two people have pitched exactly the same idea to me in the same week." Really? And it was me and Adewale.
Really?
And so I said, like, okay, maybe I should connect with him and try and make this work. And we went on a bit of a journey together, but unfortunately that never went anywhere. But I didn't let the train go. I still remained on the journey that I'd begun with White Nanny. I had the opportunity to tell a very sort of self-driven singular narrative, but I felt that telling the group story was far more important, because, you know, the complexities of each and every individual, some may have had really brilliant experiences and still in touch with their white families today. Some may have been to the point of no return and lost in the system. Some may have been fostered completely and taken away from their paternal, because there was a lot of legalities that were worked around and broken, and the framework wasn't safe for children. Like, if you heard that was happening en masse today, that would be a national story that would be shut down in a minute, you know? So it's like the fact that it was happening back then was simply because there wasn't an infrastructure to manage or process or deal with it. So basically we, you know, we went on this journey. I went on this journey and tried to find the right partners and researched for about 2 years, like, all the possible angles of this thing. And gathered a group of people. I had a really long shortlist, because when people heard I was telling the story, then a lot of people came forward and said, I want to be part of this. Unfortunately, I couldn't take everybody on that journey. You know, but I hope what we did with the film, kind of resonated for the people who were part of that community. And I feel I do know it did, because I've had so many people talk to me about it. And I'm really glad to say now, I've seen that it's being taught in sociology classes, it's touring the world, it's been sold to many different places, and that was a bet I took on myself again, because a lot of people didn't believe in the idea, so they took 7 years to make.
Yeah, wow.
7 years just because I couldn't find the right people to support me.
I was gonna say, like, the end result looks amazing. Even as you mentioned, taking down the route of telling multiple stories rather than just one. There was one shot of everybody in that circle, and then you cut to like the shot above, and there's like everyone leaves the circle. I was like, man, it's just beautiful. At that point, that everyone's really taking a moment to really share their story. So I guess my final question on this specific project would be, so actually maybe two questions in one. So one will be, of course, the partners that you found in making this. Of course, cinematography, and that was looked really great, and of course everything put together was really well put together. The research, the archive footage, even like just everything looks brilliant. So my question would be obviously on finding the partners, what that was like, working with those, and then the follow-up would be the actual impact. Even she mentioned that it's in schools now, but I want to also talk about the impact for your own career as well, and what's that done for you as well. So just those two.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, I won a BAFTA with that film, and that changed things in the way that I felt seen. I felt sort of like, okay, all this work that I'd put into my career had finally been recognized. Has it changed anything? It makes people answer their emails slightly quicker. It means that, the prestige walks in before you do. And, I've been at places with people who aren't in the industry who's like, oh, this is my friend, a BAFTA winner. You know what I mean? And, it was for me at the right time in the journey, but still part of my trajectory, because with or without the BAFTA, I'm still moving. Do you know what I mean? And you still keep on going. And it's not, if anything, it's where the work begins. Do you know what I mean? So like for me, it was really a moment in the journey that didn't define me, but kind of just said to me that finally they've caught up with where you see yourself.
But now I want to segue into talking about the actual projects that's now been blowing up and actually making more waves at the moment. So Shoot the People. Tell us a little bit about that, and of course, what can we expect? I haven't been able to see it because I think it's still fresh. But of course, tell us a little bit about that and maybe your process and what went into it.
So Shoot the People is an observation of the lifetimes and work of the first black photographer to shoot the cover of Vogue in its 104-year history, Miss Anne Harriman, who's also the chair of the South Bank. It's currently touring the festivals and on a bit of a world tour at the moment. But really, we find ourselves at a moment in time where the world needs a big hug. People need to reconnect and realign and move back to center of, well, what's this all for? Because, we're destroying ourselves so much quicker than any other generation. In like literally the last 50 years, we're like on a death run to the end, and basically, this film kind of uses the observation of Miss Anne and his work and his activism, which is basically being a photographer of the human condition. He's an observer of people within protest marches, within sort of he blew up off the back of the murder of George Floyd, and became very notable after that as a very notable voice for civil rights and activism. And unfortunately, a friend of mine had said, hey, you really need to meet Miss Anne, because I was on that journey as well. He'd seen a film that I'd made with Jimmy Akimbola called Handle with Care, and said, God, when I spoke to him, he said, this film is so close to my own true story. Like, we should do something together. And unfortunately, we had some backers at the time who basically, supported us to make this film, which is a global exploration of civil rights, social justice, and protest movements. And we asked the question, does protest actually lead to change? So through Miss Anne's lens and the story of his own personal life, we explore what it means to become an activist and explore how you can get yourself involved with protest, should you see it as a necessary vehicle to enact change. And it's a really, I'm really really proud of the work. I think every the responses to it so far have been very powerful. I pulled together a team of people that I work with to go on a global journey and explore this subject.
Amazing. I can't wait to really watch it, because I think I'm starting to enjoy documentaries now, because I think is what you mentioned before off the podcast here about getting to the bottom of something, of like the cusp of something, the crux of something, like finding out the origin of something. And actually might lead to my follow-up question as well about maybe your process as well as a documentary filmmaker. There must be a certain method that you use. There must be a certain thing that you tap into going into making a project itself specifically. So is there anything that you can share for any other filmmakers that may be watching this, people that may be wanting to pursue documentary as opposed to fiction? I'm sure you must have experienced different things, working in different mediums that you can actually share with our listeners at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I've been fortunate enough that I've had a kind of, I call him like my artistic mentor. He's an artist called Leo Asamoto, also a Nigerian man, an artist living and working in London. And he was he kind of helped me very early on, just sort of define what I was trying to do, and he took this very wide approach that filmmaking is like the art, it's the discipline, it's the Olympics of that type of storytelling, but within it you've got all these different fractions. So documentary, thriller, horror, whatever, they're all different parts of the same Olympics. But it's all storytelling, you're all feeding that funnel. And I think what he kind of infused in me very early on was like, go right down to the definition of what it is you're trying to do. Like if you're working on protest, what is the literal definition of protest? And break it down from that point and sort of start building upwards, and then sort of start working out how you bring all the component parts to kind of feed that base thing. And I always say to anybody, like, anyone that's working with me or through my company, Doc Hearts, what is the core of what it is we're trying to do here? Like when somebody comes to this project, what's that key human question that you're going to have to ask them, and that your film is going to answer? Because maybe people won't ever come to your film. No one is ever sitting around thinking, shit, I need that film on protest. Nobody's ever sitting around thinking, I need that film about barbershops. You are making the film for yourself. You really are. Like, it's your ego driving this mission. It just is. Like, there's a lot of people saying, no, I'm doing it for the world. I'm doing it for humanity. You're not. There is something innate in you that has to express that artistic desire. Do you know what I mean? It really has to express that. And so you have to give it what you love about it, or how can you find that point of intersection that marries you into that project? And for me, I always I go back to like just basic fundamental questions. And whenever I'm writing, I write as though I'm writing like my 13-year-old son. Okay. I'm sort of like, what questions will he ask me about this project? And I even speak to, I'll ask him, like, I will say to him, what do you think of this? Or and it's nice to have a sounding board now, because it reflects how a very sort of early youthful mind can approach story. And so for me, that's something that I would say to people is like, what is it that you're doing that's actually bigger than yourself? Because the practicality of doing the thing is for you. It's so you can say, I'm a director, so I'm a producer, But actually, once you're in that mission, once you're on that road, what are you doing that is in service to others? Yeah. That's just, and that, not everybody takes that approach. But that's why I work from the heart. I work from human connection. I work from a place of, how do I speak to people's traumas? How do I speak to people's inner children? How do I connect you so that when you leave something I've done, it lives with you, that you feel it, that you truly feel like when you have to leave the door open for somebody else, you know how to do that. That's the kind of stuff that I like to make. I don't make things because I feel like, I want that massive explosive blockbuster. I make things because I want you to feel something.
Wow. So it's good to see that. I guess for my take from that, will be just like, I guess have a purpose or have a mission that I guess that is beyond just the idea itself, or just the creative part of it as well. Because as a creative, I think passion is what keeps us going, is what keeps us, like you said at the very beginning of this, is we're getting a degree in media. You're not almost guaranteed to get any work. So to get into, to last long in this really, is that passion, it's that drive that will keep you going and get you to hopefully where you want to go to.
It's the only thing, you know, and that's a really great, concise way of saying what I've just told you, or encapsulating what I've just said, is that, yeah, you have to have purpose in your work. Like, what is the purpose? What's the passion? What's your why? What is the reason that you want to wake up every morning and say, I'm going to go and do that? Amazing. You know, because it really isn't, it's not as glamorous as everybody thinks.
Yeah.
You know, like you think of all the component parts that it takes to make a film, you know, and if you're not from a privileged position, the cards are stacked against you.
Yeah.
The cards are drastically stacked against you.
Yeah.
And that is the reality of it. So you have to be doing it knowing that you're walking into a kind of metaphoric battlefield.
Yeah.
Where literally people are sniping shots at you left, right, and center. And you got to be dodging those bullets just to say, I'm here.
Yeah.
That's why when I got up on the stage, that's why I cried.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Because I was like, I dodged your bullets.
Yeah.
I've dodged them.
Maybe the other side.
And I'm standing here.
Yeah.
And I'm still standing here.
Amazing.
And I'll continue to be here.
Yeah. You had a fantastic journey, and it's been good to see that you're continuing to make more things, because a lot of people, obviously, once you get to that point of winning a BAFTA, it's almost like, yeah, like you said, you've seen me now, I'm here now, and you can kind of like hang your coat, but I can see that the passion in you and the fire still kind of lives on.
Yeah, it's burning brighter.
Is there anything that our audiences can expect from you coming up in the future, or anything that you're working on?
Yeah, so excitingly, I'm about to shoot my first drama. Again, it's going to kind of have all the influences that I've talked about. It's very neorealistic, but it's a love story set around carnival.
Okay.
And so there's going to be a lot of documentary elements in there where I'm approaching it like I would shoot a documentary. But it's a whole new world for me. And I'm quite excited. I've got some phenomenal actors and actresses lined up to be involved. So, you know, it's it's an interesting new space, taking me well out of my comfort zone.
What made you want to go into...
Well, it's the only vehicle for that story.
Okay.
It's the only vehicle for that story. But I'm very, again, when I talk about sort of like, you know, what are the questions that you're asking? So with this film, I am asking questions around love between those of the African diaspora, and how that is rarely seen, rarely supported, rarely nurtured, you know. So it is a story about, you know, two people from the African continent that are basically finding love in London.
And you wrote it yourself?
Yeah, I've written it myself. It's a story based on something that I know about, and I'm basically going into production this summer. And yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting, but it's a whole different process from documentary,
I can imagine.
which is, as I say, taking me well out of my comfort zone. But yeah, that's where the energy lies. Yeah. That's where the great outcomes.
It sounds like a great concept, honestly. I think anything around carnival.
Yeah.
I think we haven't really seen much films, anything made in the UK.
Yeah, and you know, I want to shoot it in that live environment, you know, because I think, one, that's where my strengths lie, and two, I think, you know, when I look at carnival, just like so many other things that are great within the Black community, it's under threat. It's under constant threat. They constantly say, oh, you know, we shouldn't have carnival.
Yeah,
instead of finding ways to support it, nurture it, grow it, help it, they'd rather shut it down.
Yeah.
Because anything that comes from the dark corner is just not worth it.
Apparently, yeah.
Apparently, although it makes people a load of money.
Yeah. Well, all the best. Hopefully, we do get to see it very soon. I think
you will. It's called One Summer Love. And yeah, we'll be announcing things very soon.
All right, Andy. So, moving on to the fun part of the podcast now. So we're going to play a little game.
There's a fun part.
There is a fun part. Yeah. Hopefully, the whole podcast has been fun. But the idea of this game is that we're going to play 5 clips for me from famous or popular film and TV shows, or just general content online. And the idea is that you have to guess just from listening to the audio. So the minimum that you need to get is 1. That was the lowest score from last season. So hopefully, no pressure. As long as you score 1, you won't be the rest.
Okay.
So we'll start off with our first clip.
No, I got that. Boys in the Hood.
Yes, it was Boys in the Hood. Yeah, what was it? Just
that's one of my favorite films.
Yeah.
Again, that's one of my favorite films, and that for me that was a documentary.
Okay,
it was a documentary.
Yeah, I mean,
it's obviously scripted, but you know, Boys in the Hood was just a phenomenal moment in the sand where, you know, time that everybody sort of turned and looked at Los Angeles in a way that was like, whoa, we see Black America. in a weird way. Like, you know, it was just so real, like that just reverberated around the world.
Yeah,
So
I like what you said about it being a documentary, because for me, I'm a fan of like biopics, and that felt like it was a biopic for me.
Yeah,
like,
it was a real. It felt real.
Yeah,
it felt real. That was the genius of it. It's like you could feel it.
Yeah,
you could feel like that. The reason you asked me like, why do I know that immediately? Is I just remember watching Ricky getting shot. I was like, oh no, yeah, why?
Amazing. Well, that's 1 out of 5. It's a good start. Let's play the second clip.
Are you not entertained?
This is easy.
Gladiator. Yeah, that one was quite
big again. So I talk about not, you know, so the big sort of big blockbusters, I don't run to them quite easily, but when they're special, they're special. Gladiator is a film you can watch time and time again.
Have you seen the sequel?
I'm not going to watch it.
Okay,
I'm just not interested.
Me too,
I don't know. I probably will watch it, but I don't know. That's when you see what I mean. That's when it starts getting a bit crazy.
Yeah. Fair.
Just like,
well, do more. 2 out of 5. Clip number 3.
I love you. In a really, really big. Pretend to like your taste in music. Let you eat the last piece of cheesecake. Hold a radio over my head outside your window. Unfortunate way that makes me hate you. Love you. So pick me. Choose me. Love me.
I'm going to say Wicked.
No, unfortunately not. That was actually from a series, I think. Grey's Anatomy. Yes, it was. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, it's a classic scene that everyone that uses a reference now for any time a woman's being a pick-me or trying to make sure that she gets...
Okay, well, I need to know that.
As a meme now, so the Grey's Anatomy. So 3 out of 5, was it? Or 2 out of 5? 2 out of 5. Let's play the 4th clip.
What's in the box? What's in the fucking box?
Just told
you. You lied! Shut up!
That's what he wants. He wants you to shoot him.
No! No! You tell me that's not true. That's not true.
Come vengeance, dude.
Ah, she's all right. You tell me.
Come wrath.
Tell me she's all right!
I know this film.
Yeah. Such a very specific scene, isn't it?
Yes, I know this film. Tell me what's in the box. I know that film. That's going to be annoying because I'm not going to say it. Tell me what's in the box. Because that was... Oh, God, I can see it. That's frustrating now.
Do you recognize the actor's voice? Maybe?
I do recognize the actor's voice, and it's... But that's the whole problem, because the minute I get the actor...
Yeah.
Is it... I lost it.
No, yeah, it was 7.
7.
7, yeah. So that was Brad Pitt.
It was Brad Pitt. It was Brad Pitt. That's what I'm saying. That's games of teeth.
2 out of 5. That was a very hard one, to be honest. Unless you remember that scene specifically.
And that is just, games of teeth.
All right, final clip. Let's make it count.
Is it 80?
Is that your final?
No, it's not. I'm the king of the world. Again, I don't know.
Oh, it's actually on the lines of that biopic line as well.
Yeah,
Titanic.
Yeah,
he's on the front of the boat and it's like,
no.
Yeah.
Anyway, two is better than none.
Exactly, you didn't score the lowest.
Better than none.
Well done. So 2 out of 5. How did you find that?
Very good.
Very good?
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Andy. For our listeners, is there anywhere that they can connect with you and reach out to you if they maybe wanted to get any advice or just to check out some of your work?
So my company is called Doc Arts. You can find us on www.docarts.com. We invite people with special ideas, or there's a space on the website that tells people how to get in touch with us. My capacity is really crazy at the moment because there's so much, like you say, there's so much I want to keep on doing, and I've got to be very selective with how I respond to things. But I'm reachable, and if you're smart enough and if you're determined enough, you'll get to me. And that's the best thing I can say is that, if something really speaks to me, then I respond.
Amazing. Really good to hear that. And any sort of final, I guess, advice that you want to leave our audiences with?
I think for me, be passionate. Something that I love saying is just stay in good trouble. Like if you're doing the right thing, if you really feel like what you're doing is for the benefit of your community, for the people around you, for the greater good of humanity, keep on doing it. You know, and talent always rises to the top, no matter how many shots are fired in your direction. If you really believe in what you're doing, you know, invest in yourself and just keep on going. And investing in yourself is like a total mission. It's not just you know, I've watched this film and now I can make that film. It's like really understand the art that you are trying to convey. Like really kind of be sure of what you're trying to say with the work that you create. Now we are in a time where there is so much noise with content. There is so many things out there. Everybody's a filmmaker. Everybody's a photographer. Everyone's a storyteller. What sets you apart? What really sets you apart? And often people look outward. You've got to look inside. Like who are you talking to? Who's the child inside of you that you're talking to? You know, what are you trying to say to that kid?
That's really good advice there, and hopefully our audiences take something really positive from that as I have as well. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time coming on the podcast, and it's been really great to speak with you.
Thank you very much. It's been enjoyable.
Thank you for watching and listening. If you enjoyed this content, then make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the official London Podcast Studios channel. If you want to join the creative community and find out how you can get the picture, then make sure to click the link in the description.